Welcome to the Anti-Optimist Therapist podcast. My name is April O'Neill. I'm a licensed clinical social worker, and I love to think about the things in between where optimism and realism and how they coexist. Something I've thought about lately is the fact that sometimes I struggle with the therapists of the internet for a lot of reasons, but one of the big ones is this constant refrain. How can anyone be okay when the world is such a mess? Or how can clients possibly get better when the system is broken, politicians are corrupt, and people are bigoted? I get what they mean. There's a lot of pain in the world. I would never want to diminish that. But how are we supposed to grow if we're waiting on a perfect world? Every election cycle, people act like redemption is on the ballot. If my candidate wins, everything will finally be okay, and then I can live my best, enlightened, self-actualized life. Unfortunately, that's not realistic, and it's not really helpful either. And don't get me wrong, I think it's important to do things like vote, speak up, fight for things you believe in, donate time and money to causes you support. But thinking that the world can get better before you can choose to get better? I think that's surrender disguised as compassion. That's giving your agency away to the chaos around you. In acceptance and commitment therapy, we would call this experiential avoidance, waiting for the outer world to change so you don't have to face your inner one. But psychological flexibility asks a different question. Given the pain in the world, who do you want to be? What values do you want to live by? And when you look at history, the people who embodied meaning did not get ideal circumstances. They chose meaning inside of some of the worst storms I could possibly imagine. Take Nelson Mandela, 27 years in prison under apartheid. He could have chosen bitterness. Instead, he cultivated forgiveness and unity. That's committed action, living his values even in pain. Or Malala Yousafzai, shot by the Taliban for wanting girls to be able to read and be educated. They thought the bullets would silence us, but they failed, is something she said. That's diffusion, refusing to let fear dictate meaning. Or Corrie Ten Boom, she was imprisoned for hiding Jews during World War II. She said, "There is no pit so deep that God's love is not deeper still." That's acceptance, finding faith in a pit of despair. Or Louis Zamperini, he was an Olympic runner turned prisoner of war. He was tortured and starved, yet later forgave his captors. That's values over vengeance. Or Dr. Edith Eger, a Holocaust survivor and a psychologist, and she said, "The prison is in your mind, the key is in your pocket." That's freedom through perspective. Or Desmond Doss, a World War II medic who refused to carry a weapon but saved 75 men. And his quote was, "Lord, please help me get one more." That's finding purpose over comfort. Or Etty Hillesum, a Dutch writer who kept journals in Nazi-occupied Holland. And the quote was, "The misery here is terrible, and yet at night I often walk with a spring in my step." And I think that's acceptance without nihilism. Or Dietrich Bonhoeffer, a German pastor that was executed for resisting Hitler. And he had said, "The ultimate test of a moral society is the kind of world it leaves to its children." That's moral courage in confinement. Or even John McCain, a former presidential candidate. He was a prisoner of war in Vietnam, but he refused early release. He said, "I fell in love with my country when I was a prisoner in someone else's." I think that's meaning through loyalty and principle. And I won't pretend that I'm immune to it. Sometimes I feel anxious knowing that life will keep breaking my heart in new ways. But my values keep me grounded. They don't protect me from pain or my own stupid mistakes, but they remind me why pain is worth enduring and that I can always come back better from my mistakes. That's what keeps me from getting lost in resentment. That's what keeps me moving. And this is exactly what ACT describes as values-based action. Walking forward not because the path is easy, but because the direction matters. Suffering isn't a sign that something's gone wrong. Suffering is a part of being human. And I know that that's not the message that people want to hear, especially in a world obsessed with outsourcing responsibility. It's easy to say, my life would be better if the world were better. If society fixed itself, then I could finally heal. But Viktor Frankl didn't survive a concentration camp by waiting for the world to improve. He survived because he found meaning in suffering and knew he had to tell that story to the world. And that's the backbone of acceptance and commitment therapy. You can't control the pain, but you can choose the purpose. So no, the world doesn't have to calm down before you can be okay. The world doesn't have to be fixed before you start healing. Life will break your heart in new ways, but you get to decide what you're living for. You get to decide who you'll be inside of the storm. And when you reach for meaning, even if your ideals are uncertain, even if your path is imperfect, your life becomes bigger than the suffering. Viktor Frankl once said, "When we are no longer able to change a situation, we are challenged to change ourselves." That's not a resignation. That's true freedom. Stop waiting for a perfect world. Start choosing the one thing you can control, your direction. Thanks for listening to The Anti-Optimist Therapist, where optimism and realism coexist.